Hello and welcome to Lacey Rants, everybody. I'm your host, Lacey Rants. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button down there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. So today we are going to be talking about the legends of the Portland Shanghai tunnels. As the story goes, back in the late 1800s, a series of tunnels was built underground Portland. It was mainly built under Chinatown, and then there were tunnels that extended out to what is known as the Shanghai Docks. These tunnels were used to transport goods back and forth from the docks to the main part of town, but they were also used for various other illegal activities, such as gambling or smuggling of drugs, or just as an easy escape to evade police while on the run. Of all the things these tunnels are known for is the act of Shanghai, hence how the tunnels got their name. So Shanghaiing is when somebody kidnaps and drugs an individual and then sells that individual to a ship captain where they are forced to work as a sailor. Usually the person being sold wouldn't even wake up until the ship had already set sail and was out in the middle of the ocean, so they had no other choice but to work. During this time, ships would sail clear across the Pacific Ocean as they had a lumber trade set up with Shanghai at this time. These trips were horrible, and a lot of the sailors actually ended up either sick or diseased or even dying while out at sea. So of course, once they hit port, about 3/5 of sailors actually abandoned ship. Most of the sailors who abandoned ship were just seeking out jobs with the local lumber industries, just a safer means of work in general. But unfortunately, these ships needed sailors to get back to where they were coming from, as they didn't get paid for the goods until they were actually received back home. So of course, this gave rise to the act of Shanghaiing, otherwise known as crimping. The term Shanghaiing was used as many of these ships that would be leaving would actually be going back to Shanghai, hence the term Shanghai. So, while looking into the Portland Shanghai tunnels, there was one story that stood out to me, and that was the story of Bunko Kelly. So, Bunko Kelly was born Joseph Kelly, and he was a sailor who settled in Portland in the late 1800s. Once Bunko Kelly made it to Portland, Oregon, he actually started his own hotel, and then started working as a crimper, making $50 a head per sailor. That would be about $1,600 today's money. So the way that Bunko Kelly actually got his nickname Bunko was when he was asked to provide a sailor on short notice, and he looked high and low in all of his usual locations, but he couldn't actually find a sailor. That is when Bunko actually seen a 6-foot tall statue of an Indian sitting outside of a cigar shop, and decided that it would be the best idea to wrap this Indian up and pass it off as a sailor, which worked like a charm because the captain of the ship actually just assumed that it was a incapacitated individual being brought onto the ship. So of course the captain, assuming this to be a sailor, paid Kelly, and after setting sail he quickly realized that it was not a sailor and in fact a wooden statue. This is when that captain started talking to other people, and of course word got around. The nickname Bunko Kelly was born, bunko being a slang term for con man. Now there were a few articles put out in the paper about Kelly, but most notably was the one from 1890 that refers to him as the boss Shanghaier of the Northwest. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into how Bunko Kelly ties into the Portland Shanghai tunnels. Back in 1893, Bunko was hired to provide 22 men for a ship called the Flying Prince. It was at this time that Bunko just so happened to stumble across an incident that took place in one of these tunnels. So as the story goes, he enters one of the entrances of the tunnels next to a saloon, and he finds 24 men. And 14 of them were still alive, but 10 of them were dead. What exactly happened were the men were attempting to rob the saloon, but they failed to realize that the saloon was actually attached to an undertaker shop. So after the men entered down into the tunnel, they found the barrels and they tapped into it, and they continued with having a good time drinking what they thought was alcohol. But this actually turned out to be embalming fluid from the undertaker shop above. So, of course, Bunko, being the type of guy he was, he seen this as an opportunity, and he took all 24 men, that's the 14 alive and the 10 dead, through the tunnels and to the ship. Once at the ship, Bunko was paid $30 a head for each sailor. That's all 24 of them, as the captain didn't realize that 10 of them were actually dead already. And it wasn't until the ship got nearly to Astoria that the ship's captain discovered that 10 of them were actually dead, and the other 14 were deathly sick. Now, as much as the Bunko Kelly story was a super interesting read for me, it still leaves the question of, are the Portland Shanghai tunnels real? Well, kinda yes, kinda no. So, let's go ahead and lay down the facts. So, fact number 1. The act of Shanghaiing 100% happened in Portland, and Portland is actually known to be one of the #1 port cities that participated in the act of Shanghaiing. Fact number 2. The act of Shanghaiing wasn't necessarily illegal back in the late 1800s. So the act of Shanghaiing, better known back then as crimping, was able to be done if you were a boarding house owner and somebody owed you a debt and they were unable to repay it. You could actually sell that individual off to a ship captain, and it was completely legal. Also, during the late 1800s, it was illegal to be homeless. So a lot of times these crimpers would just go around and they would find homeless people and they would get them to sign papers to become sailors, and they would sell them off to the ship captains as a way for the homeless individual to actually evade police punishment. In fact, U.S. Marshals used to ride along from Portland to Astoria to prevent people from jumping ship and bouncing out on their contracts. Rather, that person was the person who signed their contract, or it was a boarding house owner. So, of course, this begs the question, if the act of Shanghaiing or crimping was legal back then, why would you hide your activities? So, fact number 3. The Portland Shanghai Docks do seem to be a real place that is mentioned in maritime records, but there was never any reports of any kind of tunnels or anything that led from the docks back to the inner workings of Portland. Fact number 4. So the tunnels underneath Portland aren't actually tunnels that stretch for miles like people think. They're actually just a bunch of interconnected basements. So there's a string of buildings up top and there's a string of basements below that are all interconnected. And it is true that these were used for activities such as gambling or smuggling drugs or evading police, but there has never been any evidence of any kind of Shanghaiing activity actually taking place in these basements. Fact number 5. The only time that there has ever been anything reported for Shanghaiing activity taking place in these tunnels is the Bunko Kelly, the con man's story. So, to be taken with a grain of salt. So why are these Portland tunnels or Portland basements so well known as the Shanghai tunnels of Portland? Well, to be honest, it's mainly just a publicity stunt that happened back in the 1970s when a bar owner actually stumbled across one of the entryways to the underground basements that was long forgotten. So once he found this, and with the story of Bunko Kelly from the old timers, of course, it was just one of those things. Why not just say it's the Portland Shanghai tunnels that were mentioned in the Bunko Kelly story and make some money off of it? And that's pretty much what they've been doing all the way until nowadays. I mean, you can still get guided tours of the Portland Shanghai tunnels or basements. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love to go on one of these tours, as it would be really cool to go see a 1800s drug den, because that's pretty much what you're going to see. But other than that, the stories of the Shanghai tunnels, or the legends of the Portland Shanghai tunnels, are just that. They're legends. There aren't actually any tunnels that lead from underground Portland to any kind of docks. They're just a series of underground basements, and a good story that was told from somebody long ago and kept up by more people just recently. So as for the Shanghai dock, that's a whole nother mystery and a whole nother story I'm not going to get into. But there's never been, not once, any interconnected basements that have been found that lead to any kind of port area, or at least that we have discovered so far. One thing I definitely find interesting is how popular these tunnels are for not being actual tunnels, and how popular they are for the act of Shanghaiing, despite the fact that no Shanghaiing has ever taken place in them. Alright, so that's all I have for you guys today. If you stayed until this point, thank you guys so much. Go ahead and hit that little subscribe button if you guys haven't already, and hit the little like button. And until next time, take it easy and peace.